Kakarotto was supposed to be sent to Earth, but something went wrong. The small Saiyan baby inside the pod had no idea, but the coordinates had completely changed. Instead of heading toward a small planet in Universe 7, the ship was now moving toward a place that no mortal had ever set foot in, Zeno's palace. The attendants of the King of Everything were completely caught off guard when a random space pod suddenly appeared near Zeno's domain. The Great Priest himself was alerted immediately, appearing in front of the small craft as it hovered and then landed softly. This was something that should have been impossible. No technology from any universe should have been able to breach this place. Yet here it was, a single pod containing a single child. The moment the pod opened, Kakarotto was still wrapped in a small blanket, his tiny fists waving as he let out a small cry. But then, something unexpected happened. Zeno, the King of Everything, appeared right in front of the pod, his usual blank expression suddenly changing into curiosity. He tilted his head, looking at the baby, and then let out a small laugh. He found the baby amusing. His attendants, unsure of how to react, stayed silent. The Great Priest, however, took a step forward. He studied the child carefully. There was something strange about him. The energy coming from the baby was unlike anything he had seen before. It was raw, untamed, but it was not threatening. It was as if this child had the potential to become something that not even the gods could predict. Zeno suddenly clapped his hands. "I like him. He's funny. Can we keep him?" The Great Priest took a moment before responding. Normally, any being that appeared in Zeno's domain without permission would be erased immediately. But this child was different. There was no malice, no intent, just pure innocence. He made a decision. The child would not be erased. Instead, he would be raised under their watch. But this brought many questions. Where did this child come from? And why had he arrived here? The Great Priest reached out, placing his hand on the small baby's forehead. Instantly, his mind connected to the flow of time itself, seeing flashes of what had happened. A dying planet, a desperate father, a mother full of sorrow, the destruction of a world. The child had been sent away to survive, but something had interfered. Something had changed the course of fate itself. Meanwhile, in Universe 7, Bardock and Genie had no idea where their son had truly gone. They could only hope that he was safe, somewhere far away. As Frieza's attack wiped planet Vegeta from existence, Kakarotto was already being carried inside the grand halls of Zeno's palace, unaware of his origins, unaware of what his future would hold. As he grew, he would not know of his Saiyan heritage. He would not be taught the ways of his warrior race. Instead, he would be raised under the watchful eyes of the Great Priest and the most powerful beings in existence, and this would change everything. Kakarotto grew up in a world where power was not measured by physical strength but by absolute control. Unlike the rough and battle-hardened Saiyan warriors, he had no concept of survival or war. Instead, he was surrounded by beings that could erase existence with a mere thought. He spent his days wandering the grand halls of Zeno's palace, playing with Zeno himself, and being watched over by the attendants. But there was something different about him. Unlike the calm and emotionless beings around him, he was wild, unpredictable, and full of boundless energy. The Great Priest had never seen anything like it. As he grew older, his body developed differently from the divine beings around him. One day, while playing in the Grand Chamber, he leapt towards Zeno, but the moment he did, a burst of energy exploded from him, shaking the entire palace. The attendants were stunned. No mortal, not even the strongest warriors in history, had ever released such raw energy. The Great Priest observed silently. He had expected Kakarotto to develop differently, but this was beyond what he had anticipated. Without even realizing it, the young boy had triggered a power that not even the gods could fully understand. Curious about his own abilities, Kakarotto began exploring them in the only way he knew how: by playing. He would jump higher, run faster, and create shockwaves just by moving around. His laughter echoed through the halls as he continued to grow stronger every day. But the great priest knew this was just the beginning. If left unchecked, Kakarotto's power could become something that not even Zeno could control. And so, for the first time in history, the great priest decided that a mortal would be trained within Zeno's domain. Not as a warrior, not as a god, but as something entirely new. Kakarotto's training under the great priest had begun. Unlike the training of the gods or the warriors of the mortal realm, this was something entirely different. There were no battles, no physical confrontations, and no techniques to master, in the traditional sense. Instead, the great priest introduced Kakarotto to a realm beyond power, a place where existence itself could be bent and shaped. At first, the young Saiyan found it all boring. He wanted to move, to fight, to release the energy he could feel within him. But that was exactly what the great priest wanted him to avoid. Uncontrolled power was dangerous, and in Zeno's domain, the consequences of losing control were beyond imagination. One day, the great priest took Kakarotto to a vast, endless white space. There was nothing around them, no sky, no ground, no time. It was a place beyond dimensions. Here, he said, you will learn to understand your own existence. Kakarotto tilted his head in confusion. What was there to understand? He was strong. He could feel it. That was enough, wasn't it? The great priest simply smiled. Without warning, he tapped his staff on the empty space, and suddenly, Kakarotto felt as if the entire universe was pressing down on him. He gasped, his knees buckling as an invisible force crushed his body. This is what true existence feels like, the great priest said. Power is not about strength, it is about control. Days passed, or maybe years. In this space, time had no meaning. Kakarotto was forced to confront his own energy in ways he never imagined. He was not allowed to fight, only to feel, to understand, to refine. Slowly, he began to realize that power was not just something to unleash, it was something to balance. His once wild energy started to settle, and for the first time, the attendants noticed something remarkable. The raw force that once shook the palace had become calm, concentrated. The great priest watched in satisfaction. The first step was complete. But this was only the beginning. Soon, Kakarotto would face trials that no mortal had ever encountered. And if he succeeded, he would become something the multiverse had never seen before. Kakarotto's training had reached a new level. After what felt like an eternity in the timeless void, he had finally grasped the importance of control. But now, the great priest was about to introduce him to something even more challenging. Instead of merely understanding his power, he would now have to test it in ways he never imagined. However, this was no ordinary training. There would be no enemies, no battles. Instead, the challenge would come from existence itself. One day, the great priest guided Kakarotto to an area within Zeno's palace that he had never seen before. It was an endless corridor, its walls reflecting infinite versions of himself. Kakarotto looked around, confused. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice echoing strangely. The great priest stepped forward, his expression calm as always. "This," he said, "is the Hall of Possibilities. Every step you take will change reality around you. To understand your power, you must understand existence itself." At first, Kakarotto thought it was just another test of patience, like the previous exercises. But the moment he took his first step forward, everything around him shifted. The floor disappeared beneath his feet, and suddenly, he was falling through an endless sky, stars swirling around him. Then, just as quickly, he was standing on solid ground again. But everything was different. The palace was gone. He was in a vast desert, the heat pressing down on him. "What's going on?" he shouted. The great priest's voice echoed in his mind. "You are not in a place. You are in possibility itself." Kakarotto had never felt anything like this before. It wasn't teleportation. It wasn't illusion. It was as if reality itself was shifting around him, changing based on his own existence. He took another step, and suddenly He was standing in the middle of a massive ocean, floating above the waves. Another step, and he was surrounded by a city of light, filled with beings he had never seen before. But no matter where he went, he always felt the same thing: his power, his presence, influencing everything around him. He clenched his fists. If this was another lesson about control, then he had to prove he could master it. He focused, planting his feet firmly on the ground, refusing to let the world shift again. But then, something unexpected happened. The reflections in the corridor began moving on their own. At first, they simply copied him, but then they started acting differently. Some versions of him looked older, stronger. Others looked different entirely, as if they had taken different paths in life. He saw one version of himself in golden armor, another in robes similar to the great priests, and one more with eyes filled with untamed fury, barely holding back his own power. For the first time, Kakarotto felt something strange. It wasn't just about control, it was about choice. Every possibility, every version of himself was determined by the actions he took. The great priest watched silently, waiting to see how the young Saiyan would react. Kakarotto took a deep breath, looking at all the possibilities in front of him. Then he smiled. He wasn't afraid, he was excited. If there were infinite possibilities, then that meant there was no limit to what he could become. He didn't just have to control his power, he had to decide what to do with it. The reflections slowly faded, and the corridor returned to normal. The great priest nodded. "You understand now, don't you?" he asked. Kakarotto looked at him, his usual carefree grin appearing. "Yeah, I think I do. Power isn't just about control, it's about what you do with it." The great priest smiled. "Then, your training is truly beginning." Kakarotto had taken his first real step into understanding his own existence. But understanding was just the beginning. The great priest had one final lesson before Kakarotto could truly move forward in his training. This time, he would not just witness possibilities, he would live them. The next day, the great priest led Kakarotto to a new space, one he had never seen before. It was unlike anything in Zeno's palace. The sky was endless, shifting between colors that had no name. Floating islands drifted in mid-air, surrounded by waterfalls that poured into nothingness. Kakarotto looked around in awe. "Where are we?" he asked. The great priest gave a small smile. "We are at the edge of reality. Here, time, space, and possibility collide. And here, you will face yourself." Before Kakarotto could ask what that meant, he felt something shift behind him. He turned, and his breath caught. Standing there, looking right at him, was himself. But this Kakarotto was different. His energy was wild, untamed. His eyes burned with a hunger for battle, and his aura flickered violently. Kakarotto blinked. "Whoa, what's going on? Why do you look like, well, me?" The other Kakarotto smirked. "Because I am you. The version of you that only cares about strength, about pushing limits, about fighting forever without restraint." Before Kakarotto could react, the wild version of himself lunged forward, fist raised. Instinct took over, and Kakarotto dodged, just in time, feeling the shockwave of the punch shake the floating island beneath him. The great priest observed silently. This was not a battle to win. It was a battle to understand. The fight continued, and Kakarotto quickly realized something. His opponent, his other self, was relentless. Every attack was powerful, every move designed to push limits. But there was no thought behind it, no strategy, just raw instinct. Kakarotto dodged another strike and took a deep breath. He had learned control, he had learned balance, and now he had to prove it. Instead of fighting, back with more power, Kakarotto changed his approach. He stopped attacking and started avoiding. The more his wild self struck, the more Kakarotto dodged, reading the movements, understanding the pattern. Slowly, he began to see it. This wasn't just a battle, it was a choice. If he let himself fall into this endless hunger for power, he would never stop. He would lose himself in the fight forever. And that was not what he wanted. With a final movement, Kakarotto stepped back, lowering his fists. His wild self charged again, but this time, Kakarotto didn't move. Instead, he extended his hand. "Enough," he said calmly. The moment those words left his mouth, everything stopped. His wild self froze, the burning energy around him fading. Then, without another word, he disappeared, dissolving into light. The great priest nodded in approval. "You have chosen your path," he said. "Power is not about the fight, it is about what you fight for." Kakarotto exhaled, realizing the weight of what had just happened. He wasn't just training to be strong, he was training to be something more. And with that, his real journey was only beginning. Kakarotto had faced himself, and for the first time, he truly understood the weight of his own choices. But the great priest's training was far from over. Now that Kakarotto had chosen his path, he needed to prove he could walk it. And that meant stepping into a realm even he could barely comprehend. The great priest led him deeper into Zeno's palace, to a place where even the Grand Minister's presence felt distant. The air grew heavier, the surroundings less defined, as if reality itself was thinning. Kakarotto felt his heartbeat slow, his energy adjusting to the strange environment. "Where are we?" he asked. The great priest's voice was calm as always. "The boundary of existence, a place where creation and destruction blend into one. Your next trial begins here." Before Kakarotto could respond, the space around him shifted. He wasn't standing in the palace anymore. He wasn't standing anywhere. He was floating in a void, surrounded by fragments of worlds that flickered in and out of existence. Then, a voice echoed. Not the great priest's, not Zeno's, but something else entirely. "Who are you?" Kakarotto turned sharply, looking around. The voice had no source. It was everywhere and nowhere. He frowned. "I'm Kakarotto," he answered confidently, but the voice responded instantly. "Are you?" Suddenly, Kakarotto's body felt heavy, as if something was pressing down on him. He looked at his hands. They were fading, becoming transparent. A strange fear gripped him. He powered up, trying to resist, but the more energy he released, the weaker he felt. The voice echoed again. "What is a being without a place? What is power without purpose?" Kakarotto gritted his teeth. He had fought countless battles. He had trained harder than ever. But this was different. This wasn't about strength. It was about existence itself. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. Instead of fighting, he listened. The moment he did, something changed. He felt everything. The flickering of reality, the balance between being and not being. He didn't need to fight it. He needed to understand it. His body solidified again, and as he opened his eyes, the void around him stabilized. He was back in the great priest's domain, standing firmly. The Grand Minister gave a small nod. "You are learning," he said. "The trial of existence is one few can overcome. You have taken your first step." Kakarotto exhaled, feeling the weight of what had just happened. He had always thought of power as something external, something to train, to push. But here, in this place beyond reality, he had discovered something far greater. Power was not just strength, power was understanding. Kakarotto had taken his first step beyond existence itself, but the consequences of such a step were already beginning to take shape. The moment he returned to the great priest's domain, something felt different. The air was heavier, as if the entire space was reacting to him. The great priest stood before him, his expression unreadable. "You have gone beyond," he said. "Now, something has taken notice." Before Kakarotto could respond, the space around them trembled. A distortion formed in the air, twisting like a vortex. Out of it stepped a being Kakarotto had never seen before. Its form was unclear, shifting between shapes, flickering between colors that didn't belong in the normal spectrum of reality. Its voice echoed in multiple tones, overlapping as it spoke. "You are an anomaly," it said. "You have stepped where you should not. Now, we must correct it." Kakarotto instinctively took a stance, his body reacting before his mind could process what was happening. But the great priest raised a hand. "Do not attack," he instructed. "This is not an enemy, this is a response." Kakarotto hesitated, but lowered his guard slightly, watching as the being moved closer. The entity studied him, its shifting form momentarily stabilizing into something almost humanoid. "You were never meant to be here," it continued. "Your presence disturbs the balance. You must choose. Return to where you belong, or be erased from all that is." Kakarotto clenched his fists. He had faced gods, warriors, and even himself. But this was something else entirely. He wasn't just being challenged, he was being judged. The great priest observed silently, waiting to see Kakarotto's decision. The Saiyan took a deep breath. "No," he said firmly. "I won't just go back. I need to understand. I need to see what's beyond. If I don't, then what was all this training for?" The entity's form flickered again, as if considering his words. The great priest finally spoke. He has made his choice. Now, it is up to existence itself to respond. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the entity raised its hand, and Kakarotto braced himself. But instead of an attack, a wave of energy washed over him. It wasn't destructive, but it wasn't gentle either. It was something in between, a force of reality itself. Kakarotto felt his body shift, his mind expand. He saw flashes of places he had never been, glimpses of timelines that had never existed. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The entity stepped back. "You are still an anomaly," it said. "But now, you are aware. Be warned, Kakarotto. The more you seek, the more you will be seen." With that, the being dissolved into the void, and the distortion vanished. Kakarotto exhaled, his body shaking slightly. He looked at the great priest, who gave him a small nod. "You have touched something few ever do, but your journey is not over. In fact, it has only just begun." Kakarotto could still feel the strange energy from his encounter with the entity. It lingered in his body, in his mind, like an echo of something beyond comprehension. He had stepped into the unknown, and now, there was no turning back. The great priest watched him in silence for a long moment before speaking. "You have been seen. That cannot be undone. But what happens next will depend on your resolve." Kakarotto nodded, tightening his fists. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. "Then tell me what I need to do," he said. The great priest gestured to the vast empty space around them. "To move forward, you must not only see beyond existence, you must learn to shape it." Before Kakarotto could ask what that meant, the space around him shifted again. He was no longer standing in the great priest's domain. He was in an endless void, but this time it was not empty. Floating before him were fragments, pieces of shattered realities, flickering like broken glass. Some showed glimpses of familiar places, others revealed things he had never seen before. The great priest's voice echoed around him. Existence is not just something to understand. It is something that can be molded, changed. But to do that, you must first find the foundation of your own being. Kakarotto reached out toward one of the fragments, but the moment his fingers touched it, a force pulled him in. Suddenly, he was no longer in the void. He was standing on a battlefield. The sky was dark, filled with smoke and lightning. Around him were warriors he recognized: Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, all fighting against an unseen enemy. But something was wrong. Their movements were distorted, their attacks sluggish, as if time itself was breaking apart. Kakarotto tried to move, but his body felt heavy. He realized this wasn't real. It was a memory, or rather, a possibility, a timeline that had never fully formed. The great priest's voice echoed again. "These are fragments of what could have been. They are unstable, incomplete. You must find the truth within them." or be lost to them forever. The battlefield started to crumble, the sky cracking. Apart like glass, Kakarotto closed his eyes and focused. This wasn't real. He had to find his own existence within it. He took a deep breath, then released a surge of his energy. The false reality around him shattered, and he found himself back in the void, standing among the fragments once more. The great priest appeared beside him. "Good," he said. "You are beginning to separate illusion from reality." But that was only the first step. Now you must learn to shape reality itself. Kakarotto wiped sweat from his forehead, breathing heavily. He had never trained like this before. This wasn't just about strength. It was something deeper, something more fundamental. But he was ready. No matter how difficult it was, he would keep pushing forward. He had come too far to stop now. Kakarotto stood in the void, his body still trembling from the last trial. He had shattered illusions, but now came the real challenge, shaping reality itself. The great priest stepped forward, his gaze calm yet unreadable. Creation and destruction are two sides of the same force. To manipulate one, you must understand both. Are you ready to take that step? Kakarotto smirked. "You already know my answer." The great priest lifted a hand, and suddenly, the fragments of reality around them began to swirl. The void trembled, shifting into something new. A blank space formed before Kakarotto, like an empty canvas waiting to be filled. "This is your stage. Now, create." Kakarotto frowned, unsure of what to do. He clenched his fists and focused, attempting to summon energy, but nothing happened. He tried picturing a battlefield, a planet, even a simple mountain, yet the space remained empty. The great priest watched silently. Frustration grew in Kakarotto's chest. He had spent his entire life fighting, breaking limits, pushing forward through sheer willpower. But this wasn't about power. This was something else. Then he remembered the words from before. Find the foundation of your own being. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. Who was he? What drove him? The answer came instantly. The thrill of battle, the need to grow stronger, to push beyond. But beneath that, there was something deeper. He had never fought just to fight. He had always sought to protect, to surpass himself for the sake of others. That was his foundation. Opening his eyes, he reached forward. This time, the space before him responded. A spark of energy flickered, then expanded. The void rippled, and suddenly, a landscape took shape. A vast, open field with a bright sky above. Kakarotto stepped back, amazed. He had done it. He had created something from nothing. The great priest nodded approvingly. You are beginning to grasp the concept. But true creation is not just about forming something. It is about control. Without balance, what you create will collapse. Before Kakarotto could react, the ground beneath him started to break apart. The sky darkened, and the peaceful field he had created began to distort, twisting into something unstable. Kakarotto gritted his teeth. He had poured his energy into forming it, but he hadn't considered maintaining it. He focused again, trying to stabilize the world, but it was slipping away too fast. The great priest remained still, merely observing. Kakarotto knew this was another test. He had to find a way to balance creation, to sustain it. He steadied his breath, feeling the energy flow through him. Instead of forcing it, he guided it. Slowly, the cracks in the ground sealed, the sky cleared, and the world regained stability. The field remained, solid and real. The great priest gave a small nod. You are learning. But this is only the beginning. There is far more to creation than shaping landscapes. And soon, you will see the true extent of what lies beyond. Kakarotto exhaled, exhaustion creeping into his body. This was unlike anything he had ever done, but he wasn't going to stop. He had come too far. Whatever came next, he would be ready. Kakarotto stood in the world he had created, feeling its energy flow through him. It was real, solid, but it was also fragile. He understood now that shaping reality was not just about power, it was about understanding the balance between existence and nothingness. But before he could reflect further, the great priest stepped forward, his expression unchanged. You have taken your first step into creation, but now comes the hardest part. To wield this power fully, you must not only create, but allow creation to evolve on its own. Kakarotto frowned. Let it evolve? What do you mean? The great priest lifted his hand, and suddenly a gust of wind moved across the field. Grass swayed, the sky shifted, and something began to stir. From the earth, small flickers of energy emerged, taking shape into figures, beings without form, yet full of potential. Kakarotto's eyes widened. He had not created these beings. They were forming on their own. Reality is not meant to be static, the great priest continued. True creation is not just making something exist, it is allowing it to grow beyond you. If you try to control everything, it will collapse. Kakarotto watched as the figures became more defined. Some took humanoid forms, others remained as glowing orbs of energy. They moved, they reacted to their surroundings. It was as if life itself was being born from his creation. He felt a strange sensation in his chest, not just pride, but responsibility. However, as quickly as the world stabilized, it began to falter. Some of the beings faded, the sky dimmed, and cracks formed in the land once more. Kakarotto gritted his teeth. He reached out, trying to force the world to return to its stable state, but the great priest shook his head. If you force it, you will destroy it. Kakarotto hesitated. He had spent his life breaking limits, pushing against walls with pure strength. But this was different. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Instead of imposing his will, he let go. He allowed the energy to move naturally, to flow like a river instead of being contained like a dam. Slowly, the world adjusted. The beings that had faded returned. The cracks sealed themselves, and the sky brightened once more. Kakarotto opened his eyes, surprised. He had done nothing, yet the world had fixed itself. The great priest nodded. Now you understand. Creation is not about control, it is about harmony. When you grasp this fully, you will see the true nature of existence. Kakarotto exhaled, feeling the weight of the lesson. This was more than just power. It was something deeper, something beyond what he had ever imagined. He still had much to learn, but he was ready. The great priest turned, the void around them shifting once again. Then let us continue. There is still much for you to see. As Kakarotto followed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at the edge of something greater than himself. And whatever came next, he knew it would change him forever.